Um, so following the opening of virtual AERI 2022, new bylaws were ratified. This means transitioning from the interim board to a new steering committee. There are 4 positions left to fill and nominations remain open until Friday, the 16th of July. Please consider supporting the transition by joining the committee. Nomination forms are on the listserv, and if you have any questions around what would be involved, please contact Joanne Evans. Yeah, and then I'm putting some links in the chat. And I just realized I did not put on captioning. I am so sorry. Is the captioning on for you guys, or is it just on for me? Can somebody just give me a heads up? People seeing the captioning. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Does anybody need the captioning? You can just privately message me and then I will get the captions to work. This is just not working. I don't know why. And I practiced last night, so I don't know. I'm really, really sorry. Okay. Perfect. And that brings me to the start of this because we are, okay. Perfect. So I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, and guys, this will be pretty collaborative, relaxed. Yeah. And then I'm going to, perfect. Okay. And then I'm going to share this. Oh. Okay, so yeah, so guys, this is Access the Archive, Disability, Justice, and Archival Praxis. And I'm Alex Bucciarelli, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. So yeah, I would love if we could all introduce ourselves. If people are comfortable talking or turning on the video, you can answer whatever questions you want of these. You can even answer a new question that is just yours. But yeah, what is your name, your pronouns? Are your access needs being met? And what is your academic area of interest and what brought you to the workshop today? And what does disability mean to you? I'll start. Alex, she, her pronouns. My access needs are currently being met. If I'm talking too fast, feel free to tell me to slow down because I'm a very fast talker. And I know that. Yeah, and I'm very interested in the portrayal of disability within archives. That's what my capstone was about. Queens College, which I just graduated, and I'm starting my PhD records in the fall. Yeah, and I'm kind of into the embodied model of disability. Who would like to go next? Elizabeth?
Hello, I am Elizabeth. My pronouns are she, hers. Let's see, my access needs are currently being met. My academic area of interest, I'm currently a student at the University of Maryland. Hello, Eric. And my academic area of interest, right now I'm working on my thesis looking at disability representation in music archives, which is partly what brought me to the workshop today. As for what disability means to me, I am myself disabled, so it's a big part of my life.
Oh, I'm also disabled. I should have said that. Sorry.
Oh, cool. I'm autistic.
So who would like to go next? And thank you so much for sharing. And guys, we can just keep our microphones on since today is going to be extremely collaborative. It's going to pretty much just be like a conversation where we'll share things. Kat, would you like to go next? You're next on my screen.
Sure. My name is Kat. My pronouns are she, her. My access needs are being met. I don't really have an academic area of interest right now. I'm not a student. I am working in a library, and that's kind of what brought me to the workshop today. I do not have a disability, so I wanted to make sure I was thinking through my work and how I perceived my work and my work environment through a lens that was more inclusive to people with disabilities. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, Kat. Julia?
Hey there, I'm Julia. My pronouns are she, her. I would say that my access needs are being met. I don't have a very specific area of interest. I'm a student at Queens College, doing a library science degree as well as the archives certificate. Brought to the workshop today. I guess because it's an area that I feel that I need to learn more in, and a workshop is a great way to do that, to practice. And disability, I don't know what disability means to me.
And that's completely fine. And I'm very excited to see you here, Julia. Julia and I are in college together. So it's, yeah. Eric, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Eric Hong. I go by both he and they pronouns. I don't identify as disabled, and so I guess my access needs are being met.
Well, actually, everybody has access needs, not just
right.
people.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, the idea of access needs is that everybody has them.
Yeah. My academic area of interest, I guess community archives, and I write about trauma, which is my entry into disability studies. So I also teach disability studies and trauma studies at U of Maryland as well. Yeah, and that's what brought me to the workshop. And what does disability mean to you? Many different things. And maybe, I mean, I'm sure I will talk much more about that during the workshop, but it will take forever for me to go through many different ideas.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Maria, would you like to go last?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So I'm Maria. My pronouns are she, her. I guess my access needs are being met. At least I didn't experience any kind of disadvantage so far. My academic area of interest is academic teaching. I am from Austria, so best wishes from the evening in Austria. I am a PhD student in archival science, and I'm also involved in teaching. So I would be interested in how to teach students, how to proceed in enhancing access to archives and libraries. What brought me here is that we had recently a discussion of disability in the archive in Germany as well. And the topic is rather new here. So I'm happy to be part of the workshop today and, learn from you what you're doing out there in the world. Disability, what does disability mean to me? I wouldn't reduce my interest in just disability, but also include like disadvantage background. That was my previous experience on that.
Nice. Great. Yeah, so guys, this workshop will crowdsource materials for a syllabus on archives and disability. We'll consider these questions to collaborate today. What should the syllabus look like? What are our learning outcomes? How should these materials be delivered to support universal access? What content should be included? And how to best assess learning outcomes in a way that promotes equity rather than exclusion? Yeah, and I mean, I know that these are very big goals and we're just getting started on something today, but my larger goal with this project is that they would love to publish this on an open source platform so that it's accessible to a lot of different people, because disability is not really discussed in archives, sadly. Okay, yeah, so does anybody have any materials that they've like experienced or worked with, or they're like, oh my gosh, this needs to be, like, this is so important to be on a syllabus? I mean, this is what I currently have here. Sorry, Peter is being quite rude. Okay, here, I got it. Here, I'm going to put in the chat the document that I've been working on. So you guys can kind of pull it up. Why is it not letting me see the chat? Yeah, I'm gonna end the screen sharing for right now because maybe it's holding me back. Okay. Okay, so this is the current document I have and the text that I have, and I'm aware that they are very like United States and European focused, and also like Canadian. And there's like a lot of Grace Noah, like Brillmeyer, of course. I've included their text archival assemblages, and I'm also prepared not to find me. It's great when I do, but it doesn't hurt if I don't. And then towards a crypt provenance, centering disability in archives through absence. And then Botnick's archival consent, because I like to tie disability into like the larger feminist archival framework. Yeah. And then I found this article about P.T. Barnum and the 19th century depictions of disability in modern metadata to be very, very interesting. A lot of my sources are kind of description based right now because of my capstone, but I would love other people's ideas. And then 6 ways of looking at crypt time. Yeah. And then documenting disability in the historical record, which is from the Society of American Archivists. And then, yeah, and then like guidelines for accessible archives. Yeah, and then universal design for learning. And then cripping the archives. I think it's really important to remember, because I don't feel like this was a huge discussion with my program. I'm going to just pull up what Julia just sent me. Yeah, that the disabled are not just archival users. Like, I mean, as you guys can see, a lot of us are disabled and we work in archives and we deserve equitable workplaces. So yeah, I mean, I would love it if people turn their mics and we can just kind of discuss like if they've read anything interesting or like a new way to explore this. Somebody?
I guess maybe as a place to start, I'm wondering like, what would you want the sources to cover? Like I can think about sources covering disability from the perspective of archival workers, from the perspective of sources, from the perspective of collections, building collections, and from the perspective of teaching. Like there are all these different categories. So I'm wondering if we could like maybe aside from just gathering like the top most beloved articles, like also maybe break it down into like what do we have to cover?
Yeah, I think that was perfect. Julia, you're always very good at breaking down my ideas and helping me. Thank you. Does anybody have any ideas on it? I mean, in some ways, I feel like covering the archival worker experience is important, especially like if this is being used in an LIS program, because it's a topic that's really not discussed, at least at Queen's College, and our exposure to the topic was like pretty limited, like unless the professor like assigned like one text, or it was like lumped into like the larger diversity class, and the book that we used like did not handle disability well and used slurs. I mean, what way do you guys feel like would be the most interesting? Like, what would you want to teach a class on?
I think I'd want to take a class.
Yeah, teach or take, yeah. But like, what would you want in it? Like, what would make it exciting for you?
Well, I guess recognizing that people come to libraries and archives from like a whole lot of different areas of expertise or undergraduate study, maybe just like a general framework would be helpful as a starting place of like what is, you know, maybe some definitions or guidelines for how we're thinking about the topic.
Yeah.
You know, like all of us said something different about what it means to us.
Yeah.
So like maybe something to kind of address that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The definition thing I feel like is kind of hard because there are some great definitions and some great sources. Eric, what would you like to say? You seem ready.
Yeah, no, I've had units on disability for, I mean, my disability theory classes are not in the archives program, so that I don't know how useful those are, but I sometimes teach the library instruction class, and which includes a disability, a significant section of disability. And I didn't do it the first time, but the more times I've taught the course, I really do feel that I need to talk about the history a lot more. I mean, talk about different models and the history of what normal means a lot more, because there are certain things that I assume other people know, but they don't. So depending on who your students are, I mean, yeah. if you are people who, if you think your students are coming from, I mean, if they see the course archives and disability and chances that they know something about disability already, then I think, but I think it wouldn't hurt to have a couple weeks going through models and basic history, you know, things, statistics, ideas of normal, that type of thing, that might be useful.
Sorry, I'm just taking notes on what you're saying.
I also think it might be helpful to have something talking about like why disability needs to be something we talk about specifically in archives or even like LIS in general, because it's not something that gets talked about. So I think a lot of times people need, I guess, some justification as to why it's something they need to be thinking about. I think Grayson has like a blog post type thing about that.
Yeah.
I don't have the link right now, but I don't know. It's
here, I'm gonna look that up. I'm gonna write
okay,
that.
Yeah. But yeah, sorry, I'm just also reading through what was in the chat. But I also really like Alison Kiefer. There's a she has like the political relational model of disability, which is very similar to what you were mentioning with the complex embodiment theory. But that was one that I felt really brought things into like a today perspective and meshed in some of the same ways that complex embodiment does.
Perfect. Yeah. I'm going to just, hold on. Perfect. Here, I'm going to also copy what Kat said in the chat. Because I don't know if they record the chat. Yeah. I mean, why I'm so passionate about archives and disability is because I am disabled, but also I was really shocked within my own program. In one of my basics classes, we read this book, Serving Diverse Populations, and it was really offensive. It used terms like handy capable and like called disabled people inspirational, and then also used slurs to refer to them. And when I mentioned to my classmates that like these weren't appropriate and it should not be in a book that was published in 2016, they said, why does it matter? It's not like there's disabled people in this room. And it's like, well, there is. And you guys don't know because we're taking all these classes virtually. And it felt very kind of isolating to feel like there's not a place for you within your discipline in your program. And I think that's like why Grayson's work was so exciting to me at first.
I just want to second everything you just said. It's like there's that I think it's Williams and Hagood. I don't know exactly how to say her last name, but they had this article that was titled "The Silent D Disability, the Silent D in Diversity," and that's just stuck with me because it is like especially in college and university areas, like diversity and inclusion and all of that it's the name of the game right now. And the idea that disability doesn't get talked about right now, especially like sitting there as a disabled person, is so frustrating. Yeah.
And then
it's very exclusionary at times.
Yeah, and also the fact that like the university doesn't feel like they have to actually meet these needs because it's like more than reasonable accommodation. Like I was doing an event this semester that I had to cancel because the university refused to pay for a sign language interpreter. Like they said that was
unbelievable.
They said it was excessive, and I was like, well, I'm not having this event. And they were like, well, can you name somebody who's coming? And I'm like, our event should just be accessible. It should not just be like. So yeah, this work kind of grew out of my own frustration. It's like what I was seeing in the system. So what was the book? What was the thing you mentioned? It was Williams, The Silent D and I Diversity?
Yeah, wait, here, I have it somewhere.
Oh,
here it is. Okay.
Okay.
Here it is. Haggard. Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Has anybody done work on like the history of disability within services within libraries? Because I'm kind of curious, like I know that this may be outdated by now, but like when I was younger, my perception was that libraries had been at the forefront of providing services specifically for the blind. And I don't know if there was any other kind of institution that as a profession attempted to do that. But then archives are like a whole separate thing. And I can imagine that like, whereas libraries may have successfully or not attempted to serve users with disabilities pretty early on, I don't think anything comparable can be said for archives.
I mean, I think the thing right now about libraries, I mean, it really depends on like what system you're in, which I mean, I guess that's kind of everything. But also like even new libraries that are being built, like the Hunters Point Library in Queens, was not accessible to wheelchair users. The desks at like references that a lot of our libraries in the NYPL system are not usable for wheelchair users. Yeah, like there was somebody who graduated our Queens College program who struggled to find a job because their desks were too high, and like they would not like allow her a way to be like higher. It's really expensive to get a tall wheelchair. Yeah, I mean, also it seems like, at least programming wise, a lot of this stuff is catered to really to parents and like less to the disabled person. Like there are sensory story times, but it seems like these things are more catered to the parents and like less catered to like the disabled person.
There's also sort of an interesting trend where like physical or otherwise visible disability gets addressed, where the invisible disabilities just don't get addressed because you can't see them, and so they're not front of mind or whatever. Yeah, and also the parent thing. There's a chat as well, but I completely forgot what I was going to say. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and then Kat also said it's more important for the parents' comfort and not the child's. So I mean, also, like it seems like a lot of services in libraries are about normalizing behavior rather than letting people be who they actually are, and saying that like this variation is actually like a part of human experience. It's not something that's bad.
I remember what I was going to say. I'm sorry. It was about language use, because right now there's a lot of push in like non-disabled areas to use things like person first language and to kind of tell disabled people the types of language that they should be using to refer to themselves, which is just a weird standpoint to take in general. But, you know, especially in something that's usually like government or in some way publicly funded, like a library space, they tend to ascribe to the person first language because that's what they've been told to use. And unless there's somebody sitting there telling them like, no, you need to be using identity first, or you need to be asking different communities what their preferences are and that sort of thing. If you're just walking into a place, even if they are doing their best and they've got all the signage up and stuff, but they're talking about person with disability, or they're using language that your community would just shake their head at and like turn around and walk out, it's not a welcoming place anymore. So bringing it back to the syllabus, just including things that talk about different communities and the language choices that they've made and whether they prefer person or identity first and that sort of thing. Just, or even just defining what that is for someone who's not familiar, I think would be really, really important, because that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, also like people, I've noticed that people will shout you down. Like in that book we discussed, like we were in a small book group, there were 6 of us, and I said a lot of language is pretty problematic. And then they were like, no, like my mom, who's like an autism, #autism mom, like that her child is a child with autism. And I was like,
that makes me so frustrated.
Like, disability is not a dirty word.
No, and especially autism. I mean, I come from a music background. Like my undergrad degree is in music, and in music, there's a very common marking that comes from Italian that is ritardando, and it just means slow down, but it's often abbreviated as what we would call the R slur, right? And being an autistic person and listening to all of my other music friends making jokes about, ha ha, it told us to be a retard, that's not okay.
Yeah.
But it's like, no one, it just doesn't get through their heads.
Yeah. And then you have to like,
it's ridiculous.
And you're like forced to like self-disclose. And sometimes don't take that well.
Yeah. So I mean, even just basic things like don't call people slurs.
Yeah.
And don't make jokes about them. Like you wouldn't use the N word, so why would you use the R word?
Yeah. I mean,
that's not okay.
One of the slurs the book used was the M word, and then I was like, hey, that's like really not okay language in the group. And the other person in our group goes, oh yeah, like they like to be called the tiny people. And I was like, no, they don't.
That's
I'm like, they're not the borrowers. But so,
does that conversation then maybe belong like at the start of the semester, so that you lay a ground, like kind of get everyone on the same page in terms of how you're going to talk about things throughout the course of the semester, especially for folks who have, who just may not know as much.
Yeah. That's a great idea. And I have noted it. That was a very good idea. I mean, what else would you guys like? So then would you do communities after that? Like the different disability communities, or like should like there really be a history lesson? How long do you feel like should be spent on like language use?
Something that hasn't been brought up, but I think might be interesting, is to actually talk about portrayals of disabilities in archival collections. Because one of the things a lot of archivists I've talked to don't think there's anything that they have anything, right? But that is almost never true, because disability is in almost everything. But they don't know what to look for, and they don't know what it means when they see it, right? So I think something like that would be useful.
Yeah.
I don't know what you have at Rutgers that you might be able to show immediately, that might be useful too. Or,
I mean, I don't start at Rutgers for a couple months, but I'm pretty sure they have a bone room collection, which are like skulls that were collected for eugenics, and then also to like populate racist ideas. And I mean, they no longer exist, but I mean, they no longer are shown. But most older institutions do have them, and Rutgers happens to have a mummy, so it makes me feel like they probably have other sketchy bodies. Yeah, but I mean, also outside of literal embodied disability experience, it's like these things are kind of hidden in a way. And then also, I mean, I like come from a little bit of an art history background, and there's like, I mean, there's always certain paintbrushes like we're shown to like have certain meanings, like death. So where's language usage? Yeah. Or what? Hi, Kazia. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to like introduce yourself? Also, no problem if you don't.
Oh, sure. My name's Kasia. My pronouns are she, her. I got the time zone mixed up, so I'm here now.
No problem. We're so excited to have you. And yeah, and then like the other, so what brought you to the workshop today? What are your academic or professional interests? Yeah, those were like the other questions. No pressure to answer though.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize it was me. Yeah, I'm at UBC in the iSchool in the dual Masters of Archival and Library Studies program. Sorry, I was not expecting to talk.
You don't have to talk. No pressure to talk. We're just like collaborating right on the syllabus. I just wanted to bring you in and like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in like queer archives, like in Asian archives, community stuff mostly. Yeah,
perfect.
That's what I got.
Perfect. That was great. Right. That's what we just discussed. Yeah. I mean, Eric, how do you feel like? I mean, yeah. At UM, how do you feel like you guys have like dealt with like disability within archives or like found that hidden disability? I guess. Also, like move on to one of the other questions if people have no more words on this. Yeah, I mean, I think we've already discussed this a little bit, but like, what should be the goals of learning outcomes? Like, what would we want students, like, what would we want learners to come out of this with? Like, yeah. I mean, for me, it's definitely the language thing and how to handle the materials of the disabled, but also, yeah. But also, the disabled are among us and that we are archivists. Yeah. Yeah, Eric?
I would say the first thing is work environment. How to create a better work environment. And how to create a better user experience. And 3 is better understanding of disability in archival collections. Those would be my 3, but I'm sure there are many others that other people will prioritize.
Okay, so Kat said, language use, evaluating space for inclusivity, and then awareness of disabilities and access on accessibility. So I'm gonna just add that to my notes. So how do you guys feel like these materials should be delivered to support universal access? And I know that like there needs to be several formats because universal access is not universal. And sometimes when you meet one group's needs, it does not meet everybody's. And then it like can sometimes preclude those needs.
I mean, I think ultimately the goal and this is going to be a very, very long-term goal for most places, is that it is part of the work process, right? So you're not dealing with accommodations in most instances. These things are automatically produced. I understand that we're a long way off from that.
Yeah, I totally agree, Eric. So that's also my kind of approach I pursue, so that students implicitly always include perspectives in each archival process, because, for example, I cannot teach just a course on disability. So I always try to point out aspects which should be included in each archival process. And personally, I also think it's just to get the message across, that accessibility not only supports disabled persons, but everyone. Like, what helps others also helps everyone, usually, you know. If we have, like, for example, a reading room on the basement, it not only helps someone with a wheelchair, it like helps everyone, because no one enjoys going upstairs. So that's always the kind of message I try to get across, but I don't know if you agree on this.
I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, the first example that comes to my mind is having wide, like, aisles, because they accommodate wheelchair users, but they also accommodate people who brought strollers for children. Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I just don't know. Yeah.
I also think like an understanding of the ways that disability intersects with other identities is important, because like people are not just disabled, they are also so many other things. Like you could go for gender, or you could go down the race or anything. Like all of those things intersect, and have very large impacts on people's lives. So like my experience as a white autistic woman is going to be very different than like a Black autistic woman, much less a man, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and even just like basic things like knowing to ask about access needs the same way that we might ask about pronouns or something like that. And I know even pronouns, people don't always ask about them. So adding access needs is a big ask, but you know, in an ideal world, right?
Yeah. I went to a conference in March, and they asked everybody if their access needs were being met, and I thought that was amazing.
Wow, that's awesome.
And like, if there's any way for people, anybody need anything like else?
Yeah.
Like, that's really nice, because we all have access needs. Like, it was really hot, and so we all needed it.
Yeah. Or like awareness of stereotypes and how to, like, what they are, like what the primary ones are, and then like ways to avoid them. And I mean, for me, this is just it's not personal, but a lot of people benefit from it. But even just running your PDFs through OCR before putting them on wherever the students are downloading them from, so that they don't have to run them through OCR, because even people who need OCR may not know how to do it. So that was always something I found really helpful.
So what is OCR?
Optical character recognition. It's a function in, I don't want to say most, I know it's in Adobe, but if you run a PDF through it, it'll take a PDF that is otherwise just like a series of images, and find each letter, word, etc. And it will allow your computer to recognize those. So it makes things like copying a hunk of text out of a PDF possible, so that you can just put it into your document, which is helpful for everybody.
Yeah.
But it also lets a screen reader read the PDF. Or it makes it easier to zoom in because your computer will recognize it, those sorts of things. And as somebody who sometimes uses visual accessibility stuff, I love OCR.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think it's funny, like, that we can talk about what should be in a I guess in a class for a syllabus, but like many of my professors do not do these things. And I don't have like like with the OCR, I've had to download an OCR course reading materials myself in order to be able to, I mean, for me, it's because I want to be able to search along reading. But also I noticed with courses where, you know, you might have like a lecture with a PowerPoint or a lecture that's recorded as a video, right? And then you never have like as a slideshow of a of a PowerPoint, and you never get the PowerPoint itself. So you can't, if you can't necessarily like go through the whole video and take notes on what somebody's saying along the way, you just don't have the accompanying slides.
Yeah.
And especially with like remote instruction, like I dropped an entire class because that's how it was delivered. And I don't have, to my knowledge, I don't have a disability, but it was just so inaccessible for me to have to approach the content of the class that way that I just dropped the whole class. So I think it's just also, you know, I guess advocacy that has to be done by faculty within their departments. Like if you're going to teach the class to your students, you should also be doing the things that make it easier for students who may have disabilities.
I totally agree. And like, I feel like younger professors, like a lot of them get it. But I've also been hearing of a lot of people who've like who one of their accommodations is they get lecture notes. And professors have now said like, oh, that's my intellectual property. It's like you're teaching it. Could you give lecture notes? It makes it so the course is more accessible. Also, fun fact, anything that you create for coursework at most universities is not your intellectual property. It belongs to the university. But I digress.
That's actually a big battle right now. But I mean, I mean, there's no reason to not give students notes. That's you know, but who owns that? It's a big battle right now.
Yeah, no, and I mean that, and I think people should get to own their work. I think professors should get to own their work. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're teaching the material already in class, sharing the notes just makes it, yeah, kind of makes it more equal. And I've also really liked courses that I've taken where they pretty much just give everybody like what would have been considered the accommodations, like they share their notes, like just so that people are not forced to then ask for like something else. I think is cool. Yeah.
Or even just something like flexible deadlines by default, or allowing, I had a professor who let students set their own deadlines within reason. Like he didn't let us just put everything at the very last day of the semester because that would be a little ridiculous and we'd end up in trouble. But you know, he gave us like ranges where you were allowed to turn stuff in basically whenever. And then students could work around their own schedules. They could have whatever struggle they might have in terms of, you know, time management and still be okay. Like if you struggle with executive function, that's great. You're still gonna get your thing in on time because you've got all semester to do it if you need to. And that was amazing.
Yeah. How did you know what I was gonna mention next? I love the flexible deadlines.
They're so good.
They are. It just makes everything so much easier.
Yeah, or even like student athletes who have to go travel. I mean, I can't say that I've ever been an athlete, but I know that they appreciated it too because they were gone some weekends. It works for everyone.
Yeah, everybody likes that. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, also, sometimes you don't want to disclose what's going on with you. The flexibility is helpful.
True.
We might quickly discuss one more topic and then we're going to start to wrap up because they want our sessions to like end on time. Okay, so how is the best way to assess learning outcomes in a way that promotes equity rather than exclusion? I mean, I've been like reading a little bit about the ungrading, but like I'm not really sure how actually helpful it is.
I think flexibility in the way that you assess learning outcomes, because so like my sister had a professor who did ungrading with their class, and she hated it because the professor wouldn't tell them their grades. So she got to like midterm and was really frustrated because she didn't know if she was, you know, like had an A+ in the class or if she was failing the class. She just had no sense of it, and she just needed to know so that she could adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
So I think from a practical standpoint, like ungrading is fantastic, but at the end of the day, like your GPA still matters in a university setting.
I think if you're doing
so,
a collaborative process between the professor and the student.
Yeah. And I think for me, the more effective thing is just to let students choose how they present what they've learned. Like if you let them build a website, write a paper, make a video, you know, like as long as they're demonstrating their comprehension of whatever knowledge you want them to demonstrate, it probably doesn't matter what form it comes in. And also it's probably going to be more fun to grade it because you're not just going to be reading papers for 3 weeks. You're going to be like doing all sorts of different stuff. So
yeah,
I think there's flexibility.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I went to an undergraduate institution where like we didn't receive grades. We received very long letters about like what we did and like the quality of our work. And like it was really cool in a lot of ways, like the right kinds of professors. But some professors just like mishandled it and like used it as like a way to like list everything you did wrong. And then also like we could not immediately get our grades for a long time. We had to like pay for our transcripts up until I was like maybe a junior, and they quit doing that because they realized it was problematic. People could not see their grades.
I just wanted to raise one thing. Yeah. So like my mind kind of goes to like I agree with everything that everyone is saying. But I think for me, like I have like pretty extreme like trauma responses, like with like intersecting kind of like psychosis, anxiety, depression, that sort of thing. And it sometimes like manifests itself in class settings in ways that like I can't really take back, like even with accommodations, like it's a weird behavior and it's like, what do you do about that? Like where, you know, you're kind of like heaving and sobbing in the front of the class while like giving a presentation, or like where I'm like in a manic state and I send my prof like a weird ass email that like is literally from another dimension, you know, like just like it, you know, and just I think, I don't know if other people have been in situations like that, but just like where you're kind of, your disabilities manifest itself in a way that can't really be accommodated. Like it happens, people witness it, it's uncomfortable for everyone, and you just have to like keep going. I just wanted to like raise that as a thing.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I've had the same experience, and it's really hard to come back from. Like, I mean, yeah, like I was at the New School for my MA in sociology, which I finished, but I didn't get into the PhD program because like partially because when we were taking our comprehensive exams, I like reacted really poorly to like a new psychotropic medication, and it made it so that I could not take the exam with everybody else, and I had to wait like a little bit longer, and they saw that as a weakness. And yeah, I mean, it's hard because it's, I mean, I don't like to quote Irving Goffman, but I mean, it's this idea of like stigma and the spoiled reputation. Like, how do you come back from that? I don't know, but I also think, I mean, I've done some teaching, but it's like having the awareness that so I think sometimes it's hard to remember that like everybody comes into like any space with their own experiences. And in some ways you have to like be a little bit forgiving. But I mean, I know it's difficult. But yeah, it's hard to know like where do you go from there? Because then it starts coloring how like the people in your class see you, how the professor sees you.
Yeah, I had an experience in undergrad where we had a big exam. It was something like 30% of our grade at midterm type of thing. And a section of it was give short definitions. I'd never had a class with this professor before. So I said, okay, short definitions, a couple of words, that's a short definition. Turns out she'd wanted like a paragraph, and me giving like 3 words to define terms was completely unacceptable. So I failed the exam, which in hindsight is completely understandable. But then this was a professor who posted our grades publicly. So everyone could see who got what grade. And then, you know, it's not a good feeling to know that you get a terrible grade just because you didn't understand what was being asked of you. I didn't take any other classes with that professor, but I mean, there's just some I don't want to say outdated, but perhaps outdated practices that still show up in academia. And I also think that just giving everyone, not just students, but like faculty, staff, administrators, like everybody, some sort of basic understanding of some of the ways in which disability can manifest and what might be difficult for people is important. And, you know, in a course like the one that we're pretending to, or not pretending to, but working on right here, you know, how are we supposed to educate the administrators? Questionable. But I do think that there's something to be said for educating like the next generation of archivists type of thing. I'm trying to think, it might have been Caswell had an article on that. Something like, I don't, I'll look, but yeah, but just like embedding that understanding and trying to change some of the older things. So wow.
And I like that we're all talking about reform. I think it's super important. And I think that this like group of archivists is really great. I think that like, I don't know, like my program in Queens College, it made me really excited to like that all of these really cool people were going into the field. Like there were some people that were obviously problematic. But yeah, I mean, it seemed like people were actually thinking about these important issues and not seeing like records as neutral, which I don't know why they were pushing for so long. Okay, so, copy that. So I guess since we have 6 minutes left, does anybody have any final thoughts they'd like to share? And if people could give me their emails, I'd really appreciate it, and I'll share the notes that I took today. And I'll give you guys my email. But I really appreciate you guys spending this time together today. Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. And I hope we all get to chat soon and like you guys, yeah. Yeah. I was really worried that nobody was going to show up today, so this was very refreshing. Like 2 minutes before, I was like ready to be like, okay, like nobody's coming, and like that's fine. Just want to say I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys like taking me here to like discuss this topic. It's not always easy. I like really appreciate people sharing their experiences. So, yeah. If there are no other words, I'm gonna sign off. Is everybody good with that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was so great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming.